On Christmas Eve, while the living room glowed with twinkling lights and the smell of roasted turkey filled the air, my sister Sabrina raised her glass with that sly little smirk she always wore when she wanted to make me squirm. To my little nephew on the way, she announced, her voice ringing out above the chatter. Then she paused dramatically, looking straight at me across the table. "Oh wait. Natalie doesn't have kids, does she?" The room froze for half a second before laughter bubbled up around me, some awkward, some genuine. My uncle chuckled nervously. My cousin covered her mouth, trying not to giggle. Even my parents exchanged a look, like they wished Sabrina hadn't said it, but they didn't speak up. And me? I sat there frozen, my cheeks burning hot while my stomach twisted into knots. Sabrina's smirk widened, satisfied, like she'd just won a competition I didn't even know I was playing. Before I continue, please subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Your support means the world, and it helps me share even more of these stories with you. Now, let me take you back a bit. This wasn't the first time Sabrina had done something like this. In fact, mocking me had become her favorite holiday tradition. If it wasn't about kids, it was about my dating life. If it wasn't about dating, it was about my career. She always found a way to make me the punchline. The worst part? She was only 3 years younger than me. I was 30, she was 27, but you'd think she was decades ahead with how she flaunted her life. Married by 25, pregnant by 26, and now glowing with her second baby on the way. At least, that's how she wanted everyone to see it. Sabrina loved being the center of attention. Growing up, she was the loud one, the charming one, the one who could do no wrong. And me? I was the quieter sister, the one who studied hard, kept my head down, and tried to avoid conflict. For years, that meant letting her little jabs slide off my back. But lately, they were starting to cut deeper. Because the truth was, I wanted kids. I wanted a family. But life hadn't unfolded that way for me yet. And the way Sabrina turned that into a weapon, into something to laugh at, made me feel like she was stripping away my dignity piece by piece. I tried to ignore it, poking at the stuffing on my plate as the laughter died down and conversation shifted. But her words hung over me like smoke, impossible to clear. "Natalie, are you okay?" my cousin Jenna whispered beside me, her eyes soft with pity. I forced a smile. "I'm fine." But inside, I was anything but fine. That's when the memories started rushing back, every cruel joke Sabrina had made over the years. At Thanksgiving last year, when she leaned over the pumpkin pie and said, "Careful, Nat, don't eat too much or you'll scare away the men." Everyone had laughed, and I'd laughed too, pretending it didn't sting. Or at my birthday dinner, when she handed me a gift bag filled with diapers as a joke. I'd smiled for the cameras while my insides crumbled. And now, on Christmas Eve, she had decided to humiliate me in front of the entire family once again. I sat there quietly, my fork trembling slightly in my hand. My father cleared his throat and tried to redirect the conversation toward football. My mother asked Sabrina how she was feeling with the pregnancy, and of course, Sabrina launched into a dramatic description of morning sickness, swollen ankles, and how her husband was the most supportive man alive. Everyone owed and awed, and I shrank smaller in my seat. But even as I sat there, humiliated, something inside me was shifting. I was tired. Tired of pretending her words didn't hurt. Tired of being the easy target. Tired of letting her smugness go unchallenged. For years, I thought staying silent meant staying strong. That if I didn't give her a reaction, I was somehow winning. But in that moment, surrounded by twinkling lights and forced laughter, I realized silence had only given her more power. I pressed my napkin into my lap, forcing my breathing to steady. Sabrina thought she knew everything about me, about why I didn't have kids, about what my life looked like compared to hers. But she didn't know a thing. Because the truth, the real truth, was something I had never shared with anyone, not even my parents. And this Christmas, for the first time, I wasn't going to sit quietly anymore. Sabrina thought her cruel toast was the punchline of the night. What she didn't realize was that I had been carrying a truth, one that would not only silence her mockery, but also change how the entire family saw me. As I lifted my glass and took a slow sip, I made a silent vow: this is the last time she humiliates me without consequence. Because soon, very soon, the tables would turn. The sound of clinking silverware and chatter filled the dining room, but to me, it all felt muffled, like I was underwater. My sister Sabrina sat across the table, glowing in her red maternity dress, one hand cradling her belly as if to remind the world she was carrying life. Every time she spoke, people leaned in. Every time she laughed, the room followed. And me? I sat there like a shadow. But inside, something was burning. I forced myself to join the small talk when people turned my way, smiling at my uncle's joke, nodding at my aunt's story about her new puppy, but I wasn't really listening. I was watching. Watching Sabrina, watching the smug curl of her lips, the way her husband's hand rested proudly on her chair, the way she basked in everyone's admiration. She thought she was untouchable. Halfway through dinner, she leaned across the table toward me. "So, Natalie," she said sweetly, her voice sugar-coated with fake concern, "how's the single life treating you? Still holding out for Prince Charming?" The words dropped into the silence, and a few people chuckled awkwardly. My chest tightened, but I didn't flinch. Not this time. I smiled faintly, swirling my wine glass. "It's treating me just fine, thank you." Sabrina smirked, clearly disappointed she hadn't gotten the reaction she wanted. She turned back to the table, launching into another story about her perfect life. But as she talked, I thought about the truth I'd been holding in for years. The truth about why I didn't have kids. The truth about the quiet, lonely nights when I wondered if I ever would. And most of all, the truth that Sabrina had no idea existed, a truth that could shatter her pedestal in an instant. When dessert was served, I excused myself from the table and slipped into the kitchen. I needed a moment. The smell of cinnamon and sugar filled the air, the pie cooling on the counter. I leaned against the cabinet, pressing my palms flat to steady myself. I thought about the folder tucked away in my bag, the one I debated bringing tonight. I hadn't planned on revealing it. I'd told myself it wasn't the right time, that Christmas Eve wasn't the place. But Sabrina had made it the place. She had pushed me too far. The truth was, I hadn't just been living child-free. I hadn't been careless or selfish or unlovable the way Sabrina always implied. I had been living with something much heavier: infertility. At 28, after years of trying with my ex, I learned that I couldn't conceive naturally. It had crushed me. And though the relationship eventually ended, the diagnosis followed me like a shadow. I had carried it alone, keeping it secret even from family, because I didn't want pity. I didn't want to be defined by what I lacked. But Sabrina had turned my silence into her weapon, and now, I was done letting her win. When I returned to the table, everyone was serving slices of pie. Sabrina was in the middle of telling a dramatic story about how her baby kicked so hard she thought he'd bruised a rib. Everyone laughed on cue, hanging on her every word. I slid back into my seat, calmer than I'd been all evening. My decision was made. I waited until there was a lull in the conversation, until the only sound was the clinking of forks against plates. Then I set my glass down deliberately. "I actually have something I'd like to share," I said. All eyes turned to me. Sabrina raised an eyebrow, smirking like she was waiting for me to embarrass myself again. "Oh, do tell." I folded my hands in my lap, taking a steadying breath. For years I've let certain comments slide. Jokes about my love life, about not having kids, about being less. But I think it's time I explained why. The table went quiet. My father cleared his throat. My mother's fork froze halfway to her mouth. I looked straight at Sabrina. Her smirk faltered, just slightly. "I can't have children," I said softly but firmly. At 28, I was diagnosed with infertility. And while I don't owe anyone an explanation, I'm tired of sitting here being mocked for something I never chose. The room went still. My aunt gasped quietly. My cousin's eyes widened. Even my parents looked stunned, like the ground had shifted beneath them. Sabrina blinked. For once, she had no quick comeback. I continued, my voice steady. "I didn't share this before because it's painful, because it's private. But I think it's important you all know that every joke, every jab, every cruel toast at my expense, it wasn't funny. It was cruel. I could feel my heartbeat in my throat, but I didn't waver." My mother finally spoke, her voice shaking. "Natalie, why didn't you ever tell us?" "Because I didn't want pity," I said. "I didn't want this to be the only thing people saw when they looked at me. But I also didn't deserve to be ridiculed for it." I looked back at Sabrina. Her face was pale now, her confidence cracked. She opened her mouth as if to speak, then closed it again. For the first time in years, she had nothing. The silence stretched on, heavy and thick. And then, slowly, I pushed back my chair. "I think I'll step outside for some air." I left the table with my head high, my heart pounding but lighter than it had felt in years. Because finally, the truth was out. And this time, Sabrina wasn't the one holding the power. The cool night air hit my face as I stepped outside, my heels crunching against the thin layer of snow on the porch. My chest rose and fell in heavy breaths, but for the first time in years, I wasn't suffocating. I was free. Behind me, the muffled voices of my family spilled out through the dining room window. The silence I had left behind had cracked into chaos. I could almost picture it: Sabrina trying to laugh it off, my mother dabbing her eyes with a napkin, my father demanding answers, my cousins whispering to each other in shock. For once, Sabrina wasn't the star of the show. I leaned against the railing, exhaling a long, shaky breath, when the door creaked open. It was my mother. She wrapped her shawl tighter around her shoulders and stepped onto the porch, her face pale but full of emotion. "Natalie," her voice trembled. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because I didn't want anyone to treat me differently," I said. "I didn't want to be the daughter everyone felt sorry for. I just wanted to be me." Her eyes shimmered. "You've always been enough. Always. And I'm so sorry for the things I let slide. I should have stopped them." A lump rose in my throat, but I managed a small smile. "It's not your fault, Mom." I stayed quiet. "That's on me. But I'm not staying quiet anymore." She nodded slowly, then hugged me, tight and trembling. "I'm proud of you, Natalie." When we walked back inside, the atmosphere had shifted completely. The room was stiff with tension. My cousins avoided eye contact, my aunt busied herself clearing plates, and my father sat rigid in his chair. But my eyes went straight to Sabrina. She looked rattled, her face flushed, her fork untouched on her plate. The queen of the night had been dethroned. As I took my seat, my father cleared his throat. His voice was stern, the way it had been when we were kids and we pushed too far. "Sabrina, what you said tonight was cruel, beyond cruel. Your sister deserves respect, not mockery." Sabrina shifted uncomfortably. I didn't know." "That's the point," my father said sharply. "You didn't know because you never cared to ask. You assumed, and you used your assumptions to humiliate your sister. That ends now." Her cheeks burned red, and she opened her mouth as if to argue, but then, something in my father's expression stopped her. For once, Sabrina wasn't in control. I sipped my wine quietly, letting the moment sink in. For years, Sabrina had cast me as the lesser sister. Tonight, she'd exposed her cruelty to everyone, and I hadn't even needed to shout. I had simply told the truth. But the sweetest part was still to come. I set my glass down deliberately, drawing the table's attention again. "Actually," I said calmly, "there's one more thing I want to share." The room stilled. Sabrina's eyes narrowed. I reached for my purse by the chair and pulled out a folder, the one I had debated bringing tonight. My heart raced, but my hands didn't shake. "I may not be having children in the traditional way," I said, "but that doesn't mean my story ends there." I opened the folder and slid out a set of papers: printed emails, confirmation letters, photos. I placed them in the center of the table for everyone to see. They were adoption approval documents. "I've been approved to adopt," I said, my voice steady. "I'll be welcoming a child into my life next year." Gasps echoed around the table. My aunt's hand flew to her mouth. My mother's eyes widened with fresh tears. Even my father, stoic as always, broke into a proud smile. "And Sabrina?" Her jaw dropped. She looked from the papers to me, then back again, her face drained of color. You never said anything," she stammered. I leaned back in my chair, calm and composed. "Because it wasn't about you, Sabrina. Not everything is about you. But since you made my life your favorite joke, I figured it was time you heard the punchline." The table erupted not with laughter, but with congratulations. My mother reached for my hand, my aunt praised my strength, my cousins asked questions with genuine interest. All the admiration, all the attention that Sabrina had basked in all evening, it shifted to me in an instant. And she hated it. I could see it in her eyes, the flicker of envy, the cracks in her polished facade. For once, she wasn't the one everyone admired. She wasn't the center of the story. I was. She tried to smile, but it looked brittle, forced. "Well, that's unexpected," she muttered, taking a long sip of her drink. My father turned to me, his voice warm. "Natalie, I'm proud of you. Raising a child, choosing to give love that way, it's beautiful." The room buzzed with joy, a joy Sabrina couldn't control, couldn't redirect. I glanced at her once more, catching her eyes. She looked back at me, and for the first time, I saw not superiority but insecurity. And that was my sweet revenge. Not screaming, not fighting, not sinking to her level. Just living my truth so fully, so unapologetically, that it left her exposed for what she was, a bully hiding behind her own insecurities. The evening wound down with hugs, congratulations, and a warmth I hadn't felt in years. And though Sabrina forced a smile for the photos, I knew the night would haunt her. Because every time she thought of me, she wouldn't remember the sister she mocked for being less. She'd remember the sister who stood tall, told the truth, and walked away with everything she thought she had. And that, to me, was the sweetest Christmas gift of all. As I helped my mom gather plates, my phone buzzed with a message from my cousin Natalie. "You were incredible tonight. You shut her down without even raising your voice. Respect." I smiled, tucking my phone away. For once, I wasn't invisible. I wasn't the punchline. I was the one in control. And I promised myself I'd never let anyone take that from me again. If you've ever been mocked, dismissed, or underestimated by your own family, share your story in the comments. I'd love to hear it. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful revenge stories that prove sometimes the sweetest justice is simply living your truth.